because they don't even take into account the things like, you know, agriculture and forestry impacts, where we know that ozone can actually make it harder for plants to grow and thrive. Every time a regulation is proposed, you have somebody kind of out there crying wolf, saying it's going to destroy the economy. But the studies that go back and look at them, they find that not only the industry studies, and I'll give you a quick example, you know, the National Association of Manufacturers, back before the 1990 Clean Air Act amendments that were going to reduce acid rain in the country, they said it was going to make the U.S. into a second-class industrial power by the year 2000. Clearly, that didn't happen. You know, the electric utility industry, they said, you know, it's going to cost X number of dollars, you know, to estimate the economy. But when we go back and we look, we found those estimates are actually off by almost 7.5 times what they said the costs were, and that's not even considering the benefits. So at the end of the day, you know, the costs always are less than the benefits. You know, the nonpartisan review by the Office of Management and Budget looked at all federal regulations. They said EPA regulations, on average, have 10 times more benefits than costs. And so we just need to get these things through. We need to get it done and make sure that we're protecting public health and at the same time benefiting our economy, our forests, our farms.
Well, it's bad for the economy. Overall, it's certainly bad for manufacturers because we're an energy-intensive part of the economy. And the ozone regulation would have, frankly, a terrible impact on the cost of energy. So we're very worried about what that means for manufacturing. We're worried, quite frankly, what that means for the American economy overall and what that means for America's mantle of economic leadership around the world.
But we can be competitive. In fact, I was meeting with a member earlier today that is actually bringing work back from Mexico to the United States, actually to Wisconsin, which shows you that we can be competitive, but we have to be sensitive to the fact that the cost of doing business does matter.
So those regulations that Kurt just mentioned are regulations that have just been promulgated by the Obama administration in the last, let's say, 6 months. Now imagine, if you will, the $2 trillion of regulatory impact or cost impact that already applies to manufacturers and to the economy that have been accumulating over decades. The ones that have just come out have, by themselves, the ozone regulations or the greenhouse gas regulations by themselves would be the most expensive regulations in the history of our country.
One of the points that Tyson Cook made when he was here, he said, you know, we hear this every time there's a new regulation. We hear the business groups like NAM and others say the sky is falling. He pointed out in the 1980s there was a bill to crack down on acid rain, and NAM said at that time that it would take the United States to a second world economy by the time we hit the year 2000. That didn't happen. And I think is there some truth to that, that you guys certainly, it's not in the interest of your members to see these regulations, but it at the end of the day doesn't kill these industries either.
So look, I think it's in the interest of every American to want clean air and clean water. I have 3 children. I want them to have a great and sound and healthy environment. The issue is, are we going to be thoughtful and balanced when we issue regulations? At what point does it tip against the United States? We have cleaner air in this country than we've had in decades. And at what point are we going to sit back and say, you know what, this is good. Well, here's scientific evidence that says this has worked and this is where we should be. We haven't had that discussion. There's new science. EPA itself acknowledges and has stated on the record, no technology exists today to get us down to the amounts that they're talking about. So if no technology exists, why would we penalize businesses that are going to be the very businesses that create the next generation of technology to be able to clean the air and clean the water and clean the land? So we've got to make sure that we're incentivizing businesses to be able to not only comply with existing regulations, but to take us into a different direction if that is what is really needed.
And ozone levels, just to that point, ozone levels in the United States have dropped 33% since 1980, right. And they're continuing to drop under the current EPA rules, which we believe are very sensible and make a lot of sense. What they're doing right now is very severe, and as Jay mentioned, there's no technology, and they admit it, there's no technology to get us there. That is reckless.
And in 10 years, you don't think that technology would be there? I mean, we're talking about having this done by 2025.
Well, I don't think we know what we don't know.
Yeah.